Hi there, Year 6, and happy World Book Day. I'm going to share with you one of my favourite books when I was growing up, a book called The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, which I'm sure lots of you have read or heard of, and which we also looked at a clip from the film, although the clip actually isn't in the book, so that's in the film. We watched the clip for our Blitz narrative. So I'm going to share with you the first chapter and a little bit of the second chapter. I particularly loved this book when I was growing up because it was probably one of the first books that I read independently, so on my own, and it really creates this image of the land that the children in the story travel to, Narnia. And for me, there's something so magical in being able to find and discover this land in the back of the wardrobe. So that's the section that we'll read today, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I do. So, chapter 1. Lucy looks into a wardrobe. Once there were 4 children, whose names were Peter, Susan, Edmund and Lucy. This story is about something that happened to them when they were sent away from London during the war because of the air raids. They were sent to the house of an old professor who lived in the heart of the country, 10 miles from the nearest railway station and 2 miles from the nearest post office. He had no wife and he lived in a very large house with a housekeeper called Mrs. Macready and 3 servants. Their names were Ivy, Margaret and Betty, but they do not come into the story much. He himself was a very old man with shaggy white hair which grew over most of his face as well as on his head, and they liked him almost at once. But on the first evening when he came out to meet them, at the front door, he was so odd-looking that Lucy, who was the youngest, was a little afraid of him, and Edmund, who was the next youngest, wanted to laugh and had to keep on pretending he was blowing his nose to hide it. As soon as they had said good night to the professor and had gone upstairs on the first night, the boys came to the girls' room and they all talked it over. "We've fallen on our feet and no mistake," said Peter. "This is going to be perfectly splendid. That old chap will let us do anything we like." "I think he's an old dear," said Susan. "Oh, come off it," said Edmund, who was tired and pretended not to be tired, which always made him bad-tempered. "Don't go on talking like that." "Like what?" said Susan. "And anyway, it's time you were in bed." "Trying to talk like mother," said Edmund. "And who are you trying to say? And who are you to say when I go to bed? Go to bed yourself." "Hadn't we all better go to bed?" said Lucy. "There's sure to be a row if we're heard talking here." "No, there won't," said Peter. "I tell you, this is the sort of house where no one's going to mind what we do. Anyway, they won't hear us. It's about 10 minutes' walk from here down to the dining room, and any amount of stairs and passageways in between." "What's that noise?" said Lucy suddenly. It was a far larger house than she had ever been in before, and the thought of all those long passages and rows of doors leading to empty rooms was beginning to make her feel a little creepy. "It's only a bird, silly," said Edmund. "It's an owl," said Peter. "This is going to be a wonderful place for birds. I shall go to bed now. I say, let's go and explore tomorrow. You might find anything in a place like this. Did you see those mountains as we came along? And the woods? There might be eagles. There might be stags. There'll be hawks." "Badgers," said Lucy. "Rabbits," said Edmund. "Foxes," said Susan. But when next morning came, there was a steady stream of rain falling, so thick that when you looked out of the window, you could see neither the mountains nor the woods, not even the stream in the garden. "Of course it would be raining," said Edmund. They had just finished their breakfast with the professor and were upstairs in the room he had set apart for them, a long, low room with 2 windows looking out in one direction and 2 in another. "Do stop grumbling, Ed," said Susan. 10 to 1 it'll clear up in an hour or so, and in the meantime we're pretty well off. There's a wireless and lots of books." "Not for me," said Peter. "I'm going to explore in the house." Everyone agreed to this, and that was how the adventures began. It was the sort of house that you never seemed to come to the end of, and it was full of unexpected places. The first few doors they tried led on to only spare rooms, as everyone had expected that they would. But soon they came to a very long room full of pictures, and there they found a suit of armour. And after that there was a room all hung with green, with a harp in one corner, and then came 3 steps down and 5 steps up, and then a kind of little upstairs hall and a door that led onto a balcony, and then a whole series of rooms that led into each other and were lined with books, most of them very old books, and some bigger than a Bible in a church. And shortly after that they looked into a room that was quite empty, except for one big wardrobe, the sort that has a looking glass in the door. There was nothing else in the room at all except a dead blue bottle on the windowsill. "Nothing here," said Peter, and they all trooped out again, all except Lucy. She stayed behind because she thought it would be worthwhile trying the door of the wardrobe, even though she felt almost sure that it would be locked. To her surprise, it opened quite easily, and 2 mothballs dropped out. Looking into the inside, she saw several coats hanging up, mostly long fur coats. There was nothing Lucy liked so much as the smell and feel of fur. She immediately stepped into the wardrobe and got in among the coats and rubbed her face against them, leaving the door open, of course, because she knew that it was very foolish to shut oneself into any wardrobe. Soon she went further in and found that there was a second row of coats hanging up behind the first one. It was almost quite dark in there. She kept her arms stretched out in front of her so as not to bump her face into the back of the wardrobe. She took a step further in, then 2 or 3 steps, always expecting to feel the woodwork against the tips of her fingers. But she could not feel it. This must be a simply enormous wardrobe, thought Lucy, going still further in and pushing the soft folds of the coats aside to make room for her. Then she noticed there was something crunching under her feet. "I wonder, is that more mothballs?" she thought, stooping down to feel it with her hand. But instead of feeling the hard, smooth wood of the floor of the wardrobe, she felt something soft and powdery and extremely cold. "This is very queer," she said, and went on a step or 2 further. Next moment, she found that she was rubbing her face and hands against no longer soft fur, but something hard and rough and even prickly. "Why, it's just like the branches of trees!" exclaimed Lucy. And then she saw that there was a light ahead, not a few inches away, but at the back of the wardrobe, where the back of the wardrobe should have been, but a long way off. Something cold and soft was falling on her. A moment later, she found that she was standing in the middle of a wood at night time, with snow under her feet, and snowflakes falling through the air. Lucy felt a little frightened, but she felt very inquisitive and excited as well. She looked back over her shoulder, and there, between the dark tree trunks, she could see the open doorway of the wardrobe and even catch a glimpse of the empty room from which she had set out. She had, of course, left the door open, for she knew that it was a very silly thing to shut oneself into a wardrobe. It seemed to still be daylight there. "I can always go back if anything goes wrong," thought Lucy. She began to walk forward, crunch, crunch, over the snow and through the wood towards the other light. In about 10 minutes she reached it and found it was a lamp post. As she stood looking at it, wondering why there was a lamp post in the middle of a wood, and wondering what to do next, she heard a pitter-patter of feet coming towards her. And soon after that, a very strange person stepped out from among the trees into the light of the lamp post. He was only a little taller than Lucy herself, and he carried over his head an umbrella, white with snow. From the waist upwards he was like a man, but his legs were shaped like a goat's. The hair on them was glossy black, and instead of feet he had goat's hoofs. And also he had a tail. But Lucy did not notice this at first, because it was neatly caught up over the arm that held the umbrella so as to keep it from trailing in the snow. He had a red woolen muffler around his neck, and his skin was rather reddish too. He had a strange but pleasant little face, with a short pointed beard and curly hair, and out of the hair there stuck 2 horns, one on each side of his forehead. One of his hands, as I have said, held the umbrella. In the other, he carried several brown paper parcels. What with the parcels and the snow, it looked just as if he had been doing his Christmas shopping. He was a fawn, and when he saw Lucy, he gave such a start of surprise that he dropped all his parcels. "Goodness gracious me!" exclaimed the fawn. Chapter 2. What Lucy found there. "Good evening," said Lucy, but the fawn was so busy picking up his parcels that at first it did not reply. When it had finished, it made a little bow. Good evening," said the fawn. "Excuse me, I don't want to be inquisitive, but should I be right in thinking that you are a daughter of Eve?" "My name's Lucy," she said, not quite understanding him. "But you are, forgive me, you are what they call a girl?" said the fawn. "Of course I'm a girl," said Lucy. "You are, in fact, human?" "Of course I'm human," said Lucy, still a little puzzled. To be sure," said the fawn. "How stupid of me! But I've never seen a son of Adam or a daughter of Eve before. I am delighted. That is to say—" and then it stopped, as if it had been going to say something, but had not intended to, but had remembered in time. Delighted, delighted, it went on. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Tumnus. I'm very pleased to meet you, Mr. Tumnus, said Lucy. And may I ask, O Lucy, daughter of Eve, said Mr. Tumnus, how you have come into Narnia? Narnia? What's that? Said Lucy. This is the land of Narnia, said the fawn, where we are now, all that lies between the lamppost and the great castle of Cair Paravel on the eastern sea. And you have come from the wild woods of the west? I got in through the wardrobe in the spare room, said Lucy. Ah, said Mr. Tumnus in a rather melancholy voice, if only I had worked harder at geography when I was a little fawn, I should no doubt know all about those strange lands. It is too late now. They aren't countries at all, said Lucy, almost laughing. It's only just back there. At least, I'm not sure. It is summer there. Meanwhile, said Mr. Tumnus, it is winter in Narnia, and has been for ever so long. And we shall both catch cold if we stand here talking in the snow. Daughter of Eve, from the far land of Spare where eternal summer reigns around the bright city of Wardrobe, how could it be if you came and had tea with me? Thank you very much, Mr. Tumnus, said Lucy, but I was wondering whether I ought to be getting back. It's only just around the corner, said the fawn, and there'll be a roaring fire and toast and sardines and cake. Well, it's very kind of you, said Lucy, but I shan't be able to stay long. If you take my arm, daughter of Eve, said Mr. Tumnus, I shall be able to hold the umbrella over both of us. That's the way. Now, off we go. And so Lucy found herself walking through the woods, arm in arm with this strange creature, as if they had known one another all their lives. Here's the illustration for that page. So I'm going to stop reading there. Lots of you perhaps will be able to find a copy of this somewhere at home maybe, or we have copies in the library and at school. But as I said, it was one of the first books that I read that really, for me, created this vivid picture that we talk about a lot when we're writing our own narratives. For me as a reader, I was really able to imagine this place, this land of Narnia, and Lucy meeting this little character, Mr. Tumnus, as she emerged from the wardrobe and saw the lamppost and the woodland and the snowy sea. So I hope you enjoyed listening to that extract, and perhaps it will inspire you to read some more of this book, or perhaps look for your own examples of your favourite narratives or your favourite setting descriptions in narratives. And I would love you if you could share. I love it if you could share that with us. So do send them over to me at our Year 6 email and let me know what your favourite setting descriptions are in your books. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.